Okay. Tell us a little about yourself. What's your name? When were you born? Who are your parents?
I'm Jim Harrison, and my full name is James Dunbar Harrison. I was born November 14th, 1939, at Good Samaritan Hospital, which was only about 2 blocks down the street from our house on 11th Street. My parents, my father was Douglas Alfred Harrison, and my mother was Truth Dunbar Harrison. My mother, Mom, she was born in 1908, and she came to Phoenix in 1911, before Arizona was a state, due to her mother's health. Her mother had tuberculosis, and they had first traveled to Florida to try to see if that would help her, and then they were told to go to Arizona and see if that would make her better. So her brother, Jack Dunbar, was maybe about 8 years younger. He was born in Phoenix, and the mother, her name was Eva Landis. She died shortly after Jack was born. So my mother basically raised Jack. Look this way?
Yeah,
okay.
perfect. Thank you.
So she was an 8-year-old mother of Jack. My grandfather, I think he's Charles C.H., it was Charles Henry Harrison. He had a little grocery store on Roosevelt Street, on 7th Street, just north of Roosevelt, and eventually built a house on top of the grocery store. So my mother finished high school at Phoenix Union, and then she went a year to Tempe Normal School, and somewhere in that she met my father. Now Jack tells a story that when she graduated from high school, they took a road trip all the way back to Indiana on the dirt road. So maybe she was 18 plus 8, 19, 26. And she had been given a typewriter for her high school graduation, and she typed a diary the whole way, which would be very interesting to have that now. My father was born in 1905 in Laurel, Maryland, and there's numerous stories that I have heard, and I don't know the veracity of any of them, but I know he, after high school, I don't actually think he finished high school. He had been kicked in the chest by a horse and was kind of ill, and he had a sister that lived in Oklahoma City, and I've heard he rode the rails. I heard he had a motorcycle. Anyway, he came west. I heard he worked on the smokestack in Superior. Don't know if any, these are all stories. I'm not sure they're true. Stayed in Phoenix a little while, couldn't get work, and was leaving and maybe walking. And I'm getting some of these stories from Jack Dunbar. Walking out of town towards Superior, and met a crew of guys working on the telephone wires, and he got hired, and he stayed with the telephone company the rest of his life. So they were married, I think, shortly after she finished that first year at Tempe Normal, and had Doug Jr. shortly thereafter. So if she was 18 and born in 08, in 1926 when she was married, I think Doug Jr. was born in 27 and Betty in 29 maybe, and Helen was born in 37 and I was born in 39. So anyway, my mother was, and both my mother and father were delightful people. But she was a good cook, took good care of her family, and a big part of her life was down at the First Presbyterian Church. She'd go down there and cook with the ladies, and they'd make Mexican food. So anyway, and my father was a quiet gentleman. They basically didn't have much money. They'd live paycheck to paycheck, and that was kind of our existence. He would get upset with her because the girls would be going to a formal, and she would spend all the money buying the fabric for the formal and making the dress herself. And anyway, I can remember the dress would be, she'd be putting the last buttons on it when the boy would be coming, and I'd have to go red up the house, pick up the newspapers, vacuum all the thread off the floor, and in would walk the date. So anyway, that was, I had a very nice childhood.
Okay, what schools did you go to?
Well, I went to Emerson Grade School, which was at 7th Street in Palm Lane, and we just walked there. It was close. It probably wasn't 6 or 7 blocks. And our only really relatives was Jack Dunbar, her brother, and the father, Charles, lived with Jack. And they probably lived 4 blocks, and I can remember Charles, of course we called him Granddad, I suspect. Anyway, he'd walk me up and down the street at night. We'd maybe go up there for dinner to play, and he'd walk me home. And in Phoenix at that time, I can remember, there wasn't very many people, so there was not a lot of lights, and he'd point out the constellations to me, and you could see them. Now, you can't see them today in Phoenix, but you could see them then. So, and I went to North High, which we lived directly across the street from North High, on Dayton. So my mother had gone to Phoenix Union, and the year that Helen was to go to North High, they changed the boundary a little bit north of where our house was on 11th Street. So she moved, decided she was going to move. She moved directly across the street, so that wouldn't happen again. So anyway, I went to North High. At North High, tried out for lots of sports. Wasn't very good at any of them. Pretty good at track, and eventually I kind of excelled in track, and that got me to college, where I went to the University of Colorado on a track scholarship. But I ran the first year and then decided I wasn't going to make a big impact on the Big 8 conference, and so I got that athletic scholarship changed to a academic scholarship, and then didn't run after that. So what's our next question?
Our next question is, tell us, this is from Jimmy, about your best advice for a happy, long, balanced marriage.
Told them that today, and they kind of laughed at it. Best advice, and that's not Sound of Music, Camelot. When he asked Marilyn, how to get along, how to handle a woman, and Marilyn said, well, you just love them. And that was the, I think that came out about the time that we were married. So I figured that was just pretty good advice. So Pam and I got along very well. My mother said we made a very good team, and we really didn't have any disagreements at all. I mean, she was a good supporter, and we both had the same goals of raising a nice family. So,
how did you meet Grammy?
Well, I guess the next question probably that Courtney asked about, telling me something about the fraternity. I joined a fraternity, Sigma Phi Epsilon, at the end of my freshman year, And sophomore year, I think before the school had started, we'd already started having the parties, and one evening I had decided to go out on the front yard and take a little snooze. I might have been sleeping something off. So apparently Pamela had walked by, and her house, the Gamma Phi Beta house, was only a block and a half probably up from ours. And they were doing some sort of work on the front of the building that had some scaffolding. And she climbed up the scaffolding a little ways and tripped, fell off or something. So she sprained her ankle. So the next night, we had invited the Gamma Phi's to our house for dinner. And here comes this young lady with I don't know if she had a cast or a boot. I don't think they had boots in. Anyway, she was on crutches. And our dining hall was downstairs, so I was nice and helped her downstairs. And Katie's got to turn off somebody's phone here. So anyway, we got talking, and the first question you kind of ask is, where are you from? And she said she was from Tucson, and since I was Phoenix, that was interesting. And somehow tennis must have got mentioned, and we made the connection that she had played tennis against my sister Helen in high school, and Pamela was the state champion. Anyway, so that was the connection, and the connection was even further that Helen, during that time period when they would play each other, had invited her over to our house to have an ice cream or something after they had played tennis. So she says, "Oh, you're the little brother that's did so well in track." So anyway, that we kind of dated. That was her junior year and my sophomore year, and we dated. Well, I think by the Christmas of the junior year, I had given her an engagement ring, and we got married the year I had finished my junior year, and she had graduated.
Wow. Okay, where were you married?
We were married in Denver on her great aunt's farm, which was on, Katie, you can help me, University in Bellevue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like 500 acres, and I think now they're big homes and a country club there now. So we had a delight. Maury, her great uncle, gave her away, and my friends Pete and Tommy came, and we had a nice time. And then we went to Yellowstone on our honeymoon, and I think she caught her first fish there.
And what about your early marriage? What was your career, and where did you live?
Well, immediately after she was going to work and had a job teaching in the Boulder schools while I finished college. And a little unique there, when I went to sign up for my last year, all the ROTC courses that I had taken, the dean of the civil engineering school said, "Oh, we're not going to count that anymore." So anyway, he signed me up, and I had 22 hours both semesters to finish, because we had to get it, we had to finish. There wasn't any money and they made her quit teaching by Christmas. So we kind of eked out that last semester.
Why did she have to quit teaching?
She was pregnant with Jimmy, and at that time, if you were showing being pregnant, they didn't let you teach school. So, and then we went in the Air Force for about almost 4 years, and we were down in Biloxi, Mississippi, where Katie was born initially, and then I went on a remote tour to Wakkanai, Japan, and then Pam joined me after maybe 9 months, and So then we stayed there 2 years, and we had a nice time in the service. We had a nice time in the of course in college. Those are all wonderful times in your life.
Do you remember how much you were paid when you were living in Biloxi in that first house?
Oh well, I was the pride of the Air Force, but we would have qualified for poverty. They didn't pay second lieutenants very much money. I think it was like $222 a month. Wasn't very much. And so anyway, but we were on. Eventually, we got base housing, and she was a very good frugal manager, and it all worked. After the service, we came back to Phoenix, and there was a little bit of a downturn, and I went to work for the Del Webb Corporation, a large general contractor, and we went. The first assignment, or maybe the second assignment, we went down to Fort Huachuca, Sierra Vista, and built an Army hospital. I was an engineer on the site, and that's where Jeffrey was born.
So what are you most proud of with your career?
Well, I had probably the projects where I was out physically doing them. I mean, eventually I was in the office managing the projects, or multiple projects, but probably the ones that I was most involved in were the Fort Huachuca Hospital, the St. Luke's Hospital. Those were probably the most gratifying, where you actually were out involved in the construction.
So what were two major news events in your life?
Well, major news events. John Kennedy, of course, he was killed, and we were in Japan at the time. If I remember, I got up in the morning and was going duck hunting with some guys, and one of them came in and gave us that news. The other one was major events. Well, I don't know if the Vietnam War was certainly a large. When I was a young man, I got out of the service just as the Vietnam War heated up. But that certainly lasted a long time and was in the news.
Mm-hmm.
When we were back in Sierra Vista, the civil rights movement was like 1965, and I did not participate, but I know my sister Helen marched for the civil rights movement in